They had already taped over my nameplate before I got back from lunch. 22 years of keeping people alive, erased with a strip of masking tape and Christopher Hayes' name scribbled in black Sharpie underneath. The kid couldn't even spell his own title right, VP Operations with that extra O that made him look like the Stanford MBA he claimed to be. I'm Andrew Cooper, 47 years old, and I've been the Senior Safety Operations Manager at Apex Industrial for more than half my adult life. Started here right after my Navy discharge in 2002, when my boy Kevin was still in diapers, and I needed steady work with good benefits. Now Kevin's 19 and finishing his sophomore year at Texas A&M, studying mechanical engineering. Thought I'd be here until retirement, maybe even see him join the company someday. Thought wrong, apparently. I stood there in the hallway, coffee getting cold in my hand, staring at that crooked tape job. Didn't laugh, didn't cry, just turned around and walked back toward the parking lot, like the ghost they'd decided I'd become. But here's the thing about ghosts. Sometimes they come back to haunt you. You don't last 22 years in industrial safety without learning how to see the big picture. Every safety protocol, every inspection, every certification that kept our workers from going home in body bags instead of their own cars, that was my department. Not flashy work, not the kind that gets you invited to leadership retreats in Aspen, but the kind that keeps the lights on and the lawsuits off the front page. My credentials weren't just pieces of paper hanging on the wall. I held the Process Safety Management certification for all three of our major facilities: Beaumont, Oklahoma City, and Houston. That's the federal requirement that lets you handle anything above 10,000 pounds of flammable hydrocarbons. I was also the named Confined Space Entry Supervisor, which meant nobody could work in our reactor vessels or storage tanks without my signature. And the big one, the Hazardous Materials Operations Manager certification that covered everything from routine maintenance to emergency response. These weren't company licenses that could be transferred around like office supplies. They were federal certifications tied to my personal Social Security number, my training record, my 22 years of documented experience. The kind of credentials that took months to get and years to maintain, with quarterly recertification requirements and annual federal audits. Christopher Hayes didn't understand any of that. Kid showed up 3 months ago with his wireless earbuds and his talk about streamlining operational inefficiencies. Wore sneakers to safety meetings and called hard hats legacy headwear. Asked me once why we couldn't just use iPads instead of lockout-tagout procedures. I should have known right then that my days were numbered. The warning signs had been there for weeks. Ever since the board brought in their innovation consultant, some woman from McKinsey who charged $500 an hour to tell them what any guy on the floor could have explained for free, I knew it was just a matter of time before guys like me got our walking papers wrapped in corporate speak about organizational evolution. And sure enough, Christopher arrived like a virus in an expensive suit. Harvard Business School, class of 2018, 2-year stint at Deloitte doing digital transformation consulting, which as far as I could tell meant teaching people how to put everything in spreadsheets. Loud mouth and louder opinions about how traditional safety frameworks were inhibiting agile response capabilities. He talked like he'd swallowed a business textbook and forgot to digest it. First week, he called a meeting to discuss optimizing our safety architecture, brought in a PowerPoint with animated gears, and talked about leveraging IoT sensors to create predictive safety analytics. I listened to him for 20 minutes before asking a simple question: what happens when the Wi-Fi goes down and someone's trapped in a confined space? He blinked twice and said we'd circle back on edge case scenarios. Second week, he started asking pointed questions about my certifications, wanted to know why they couldn't be shared across the team or digitized for scalability. I explained that process safety management wasn't like a Netflix password. You can't just hand it around to whoever needs it that day. These were federal requirements that existed because people died when companies cut corners on safety oversight. He smirked and said, I had an interesting way with analogies, like I was some old-timer telling war stories instead of a professional trying to keep his facilities from becoming smoking craters in the ground. Third week, he started dropping hints about how safety oversight was ripe for digital transformation. Mentioned something about automated monitoring systems and eliminating single points of failure. That phrase should have been my warning bell. In Christopher's world, a single point of failure was anything that required actual human expertise. Fourth week, I wasn't invited to the senior staff meeting where they discussed streamlining legacy positions. Found out about it from Jennifer Walsh in legal, who asked me if I'd heard anything about organizational changes coming down the pipeline. I told her no, but started updating my resume that night just in case. By the 5th week, I was getting the treatment, excluded from emails, left off meeting invites, ignored in the hallway. Classic corporate freeze-out, the kind they use when they want you to quit so they don't have to pay severance. But I didn't quit. Been through too many deployments, too many midnight emergency calls, too many times when being stubborn was the only thing standing between disaster and another day of normal operations. If they wanted me gone, they were going to have to do it the hard way. The calendar invite came on a Tuesday morning. Transition discussion, 30 minutes. No details, no agenda, just Christopher's name in the organizer field like a signature on a death warrant. I walked into that conference room knowing exactly what was coming. Gray walls, fake plant in the corner that someone had been dusting for 10 years without watering, speakerphone blinking like a heart monitor. Christopher didn't even look up when I came in, just kept typing on his MacBook like he was coding the future of industrial safety. The room smelled like stale coffee and whatever cologne Christopher wore, something expensive that probably came in a bottle shaped like a sports car. He had his legal pad out, covered in bullet points written in that precise handwriting they probably teach at Harvard. Across from him sat Amanda Reeves, HR director, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. When he finally acknowledged my existence, he smiled like a dentist about to tell you that you need a root canal. Andrew, first off, I want to express my appreciation for everything you've contributed over the years. Really, you've been a cornerstone here, a foundational element in our operational matrix. I waited. Knew there was a butt coming that would hit harder than a sledgehammer to the chest. But as part of our digital optimization initiative, we're sunsetting some legacy roles. Not because the people weren't valuable, they absolutely were, but because the structural paradigm no longer requires certain traditional modalities. He paused like I might thank him for the poetry lesson. Amanda shifted in her chair, studying her fingernails like they held the secrets of the universe. This includes the Senior Safety Operations Manager position. And just to be transparent, your OSHA certifications, while historically important, are no longer essential to our modernized framework. We're implementing automated compliance monitoring through IoT sensors and predictive analytics. IoT sensors. The man thought he could replace 22 years of knowing which valves could kill you and which inspectors would shut you down with some glorified smoke detectors he'd probably seen in a LinkedIn ad. I almost laughed. Almost told him that process safety management wasn't something you could automate with an app. That the reason those regulations existed was because companies had tried to cut corners before, and people died. Lots of people. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I nodded once, slow and deliberate, like I was processing fine wine instead of industrial-grade nonsense. He slid an envelope across the table. This includes your severance package, COBRA information, and some very generous transition support. We'd absolutely love to keep you as a consultant for any knowledge transfer needs. Knowledge transfer. Like 22 years of keeping people alive was something you could download to a thumb drive and hand off to the next guy. The transition will be seamless, he continued, gaining confidence like a man who thought the hard part was over. We've already identified internal candidates who can handle the administrative aspects of your role while the automated systems come online. That's when I knew he didn't understand what my job actually was. Administrative aspects. He thought safety management was about filing reports and updating spreadsheets. Had no clue that my name was literally the only thing standing between Apex Industrial and a federal shutdown that would make the evening news. I took the envelope, placed my badge on the desk with the same care you'd use to set down a live grenade, and said the only words I'd speak that morning, "Good luck with that." Christopher looked relieved, probably thought the whole thing had gone smoother than expected. Started reaching for some other paperwork, but I was already walking out. Past the break room where someone had written Pizza Friday on the whiteboard in red marker. Past the safety bulletin board where my monthly incident reports used to hang like insurance policies against disaster. I took the elevator down, surrounded by young engineers with their energy drinks and middle managers trying not to make eye contact. Wanted them to feel something shift in the air, to sense that maybe the quiet guy in the corner office had just taken something important with him. Outside, the Texas heat hit me like a wall. March in Houston, already pushing 80 degrees at 10 a.m. I walked to my truck, sat behind the wheel for a moment, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete freedom. No more 5 a.m. emergency calls. No more explaining to MBAs why you can't optimize safety shortcuts. No more being the guy who said no so other people could go home to their families. I pulled out my phone and logged into the Federal Safety Management System. My credentials were still active. Of course they were. The government doesn't move as fast as corporate America when it comes to paperwork. I was still the named process safety management operator for facilities in Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. Still the confined space entry supervisor for 3 major industrial sites. Still the only person legally authorized to oversee hazardous materials operations across 45 different processing units. These weren't company assets that Christopher could reassign with a memo. They were federal certifications that took months to obtain, years to maintain, and decades to master. The kind of credentials that existed because somewhere in the past, people had died when companies tried to cut corners on safety oversight. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds thinking about the safety meetings where I'd explained why shortcuts kill people. 22 years of being the guy who said no so others could go home safe. All those times I'd stopped production to investigate a gas leak, or shut down a unit because someone skipped a lockout procedure, or made contractors redo work because they'd taken a dangerous shortcut. The irony was perfect. Christopher wanted to eliminate the single point of failure, and I was about to show him what happened when that single point actually failed. I clicked on voluntary revocation of active certifications. A warning popped up in red text. This action will immediately flag all associated facilities as non-compliant with federal safety regulations and trigger automatic shutdown protocols pending assignment of new certified management personnel. This action cannot be reversed. I sat there for another few seconds thinking about Kevin's tuition, about the mortgage, about 22 years of Christmas bonuses and safety awards, and the time I'd talked Miguel Santos out of entering a confined space without proper atmospheric testing. Probably saved his life that day. Then I thought about Christopher's smile when he said my certifications weren't essential anymore. I clicked confirm. No fanfare, no confirmation screen, just a cold system response. Revocation processed, all associated facilities notified, federal compliance database updated. I started the engine and drove to Murphy's Diner on the other side of town. The kind of place where the coffee's strong, the pie's fresh, and nobody asks questions when a man needs to sit quietly and think. Ordered black coffee and a slice of apple pie. The kind of breakfast you eat when you're about to watch the world burn and you want to taste something sweet first. The automated notifications were probably already hitting inboxes across 3 states. Federal systems don't mess around when it comes to safety violations. Every facility tied to my credentials would get flagged simultaneously. Beaumont, Oklahoma City, Houston, all suddenly operating without legal safety oversight as of 10:23 a.m. Central Standard Time. Back at Apex, Christopher was probably still in his victory lap phase, maybe updating his LinkedIn about streamlining operational excellence or scheduling meetings about efficiency optimization. Had no idea that 3 major industrial facilities were about to become very expensive paperweights. My phone started buzzing around 10:45. First came the automated confirmations from the federal database. Cold, bureaucratic language that translated to "you just nuked 3 facilities." Then the out-of-office reply from Christopher's assistant, Ashley. Apparently she was at some team wellness retreat in Austin. Perfect timing for a corporate meltdown. The third call made me grin over my coffee cup. Rebecca Martinez from our Beaumont facility, voice tight with the kind of panic that comes when federal inspectors show up unannounced. "Andrew, we've got Department of Labor people here with shutdown orders. They're citing process safety management violations, saying we're operating without certified oversight. They said you'd know what this means." "Do you?" I let the question hang for a few seconds, listening to the fear in her voice. Rebecca was good people, been with the company 15 years, worked her way up from the floor to site manager. This wasn't her fault, but that didn't matter to the federal government. "Sorry, Rebecca, I'm not with the company anymore as of this morning. You'll need to talk to Christopher Hayes about safety management issues." "Christopher Hayes? The new VP? Andrew, he's never even been to our facility. He doesn't know a pressure relief valve from a coffee maker. Like I said, you'll need to talk to him." I hung up and ordered another slice of pie. The waitress, a woman about my age with kind eyes and tired hands, refilled my coffee without being asked. Rough day at work, honey? You could say that. Just got fired after 22 years. She shook her head. Companies these days got no loyalty. My ex-husband got let go after 18 years at the refinery. Some college boy told him his experience was redundant with digital systems. I almost choked on my coffee. How'd that work out? Plant had 3 accidents in the first month. They begged him to come back, but he'd already found something better. She smiled. Sometimes the trash takes itself out, you know. By 11:15, the dominoes were falling faster than Christopher could count them. The federal shutdown protocols don't give you time to call lawyers or schedule emergency meetings. When safety management fails, everything stops, immediately. Nicole at the front desk, sweet woman who always remembered to ask about Kevin's grades, was drowning in calls from area codes she didn't recognize. Each caller reading from the same federal script. Your facilities are currently operating without valid process safety management certification. You are required to cease all hazardous operations immediately pending compliance review. Her voice got more frantic with each transfer. Sir, I don't understand what confined space entry violation means. Can you please hold while I find someone who... Click. Dial tone. Another angry client wondering why their chemical delivery had been rejected at the gate. Up in the executive conference room, Christopher was pacing like a caged animal. Had probably burned through 4 espressos already, sweat bleeding through his $200 dress shirt. The leadership team sat around the mahogany table like mourners at a funeral nobody wanted to attend. That's when Jennifer Walsh from legal burst through the door holding a printed memo that looked like it had been run over by a forklift. Her voice cracked when she spoke, cutting through Christopher's rambling about temporary system glitches. You were warned about this. Andrew sent a memo 18 months ago outlining the dependency structure. Every single safety certification routes through his personal federal credentials. We can't just reassign them like parking spaces. Christopher spun toward her like she'd just slapped him with a frozen fish. We'll just get new certifications. Transfer them to someone else. How hard can it be? Jennifer shook her head slowly, the way you'd explain basic math to a toddler. You can't transfer federal safety management credentials. They're tied to individual social security numbers, training, records, and years of documented experience. Getting new ones approved takes 90 to 120 days minimum, assuming we can even find someone with the required background. That's when the color drained out of Christopher's face like someone had pulled a plug. Then we'll hire him back. Emergency consulting contract, whatever it takes. That's not how federal certifications work, Jennifer continued. Once voluntarily revoked, there's a mandatory review period. He'd have to reapply from scratch like anyone else. Could take 6 months, maybe longer. Christopher reached for his phone with shaking fingers, dialed my number like he was calling 911. I watched it light up on the table beside my empty pie plate, took another sip of coffee, and let it ring again. Ring until it went to voicemail. He tried twice more. Same result, each call going to the same generic message. You've reached Andrew Cooper. I'm not available. Leave a message. Meanwhile, Brian Rodriguez in IT was sending panic messages to the company Slack channel. All safety management systems showing red alerts. Andrew's credentials are showing as voluntarily revoked in the federal database. This isn't a glitch. Someone manually terminated them. Then came the message that really made my morning. Guys, the automated safety monitoring system Christopher wanted to implement, it was designed to work alongside human oversight, not replace it. Without Andrew's credentials authorizing the system, it can't legally operate either. At 11:52 a.m., federal inspectors walked into the Oklahoma City facility with clipboards and badges. At 12:15, they hit Houston. By 12:30, all 3 of Apex Industrial's major operations were under federal shutdown orders. 3 facilities, 400-plus employees sent home. Millions of dollars in active contracts suddenly worthless, all because Christopher Hayes thought safety management was just another line item he could optimize away. Back at headquarters, someone finally thought to call Stephen Harrow. Stephen Harrow flew in from Dallas that afternoon, landed at Hobby Airport, and drove straight to headquarters without stopping at his hotel. The man built Apex Industrial from a 2-man operation in 1987 to a multi-state empire, and he didn't get there by panicking when things went sideways. But 3 simultaneous federal shutdowns would test anyone's patience. He found Christopher in the conference room at 2:30 p.m., still pacing like a zoo animal, surrounded by empty coffee cups and crumpled printouts. The kid looked like he'd aged 5 years in 4 hours. Sweat stains under his arms, hair falling out of its perfect styling, the kind of desperation that comes when reality crashes through your MBA theories like a freight train through tissue paper. Harrow didn't sit down, didn't take off his jacket, just stood in the doorway with the kind of quiet authority that made grown executives check their life insurance policies. "Explain to me," Harrow said, voice calm as a surgical blade, "how we went from profitable operation to federal shutdown in one morning." Christopher tried to deflect, started babbling about temporary setbacks and implementing new protocols and modernizing our operational approach, the usual consultant word salad he'd been serving up for 3 months. "Who did you fire?" Harrow cut through the nonsense like a chainsaw through balsa wood. The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Christopher's mouth opened and closed a few times before any sound came out. Just some legacy personnel. Andrew Cooper. He was safety management, compliance oversight, administrative stuff, nothing that couldn't be modernized. Harrow turned to Jennifer Walsh, who'd been sitting in the corner, looking like she wanted to crawl under the table and hide until the storm passed. What exactly did Andrew Cooper do? Jennifer's voice was quiet but steady. He held every federal safety certification required to operate our facilities. Process safety management for hazardous materials, confined space entry, supervisor for all maintenance operations, emergency response coordinator for 3 states, all non-transferable credentials in his personal name. Harrow's jaw tightened like a vice. And young Christopher here didn't think to check this before terminating him? The silence in that room was so thick you could have cut it with a butter knife and served it for dinner. Christopher tried one more Hail Mary pass. "We can fix this. Hire new people, get new certifications, implement digital monitoring systems that don't depend on individual employees." "In 90 days minimum," Harrow interrupted. "While our facilities sit idle, our contracts get canceled, our workers file for unemployment, and our competitors pick up every piece of business we just threw away." He walked to the window, looked down at the employee parking lot that was already half empty. Security had sent most people home when the phones started ringing with cancellation notices. When he turned back around, his eyes had the kind of cold calculation that built industrial empires and buried corporate careers. "Christopher, you've successfully accomplished something I didn't think was possible. You've managed to destroy 30 years of operational excellence in a single morning." Christopher's voice cracked when he tried to respond. "Sir, I was trying to streamline operations, eliminate inefficiencies, modernize our approach." Harrow raised one hand, and Christopher's mouth snapped shut like a mousetrap. "You eliminated the one person who kept us legally operational and called it modernization. You fired our most critical employee because you thought his expertise could be replaced by an app." Christopher opened his mouth again, but Harrow wasn't finished. "Security will escort you out. Your access is revoked immediately. Don't bother cleaning out your office. We'll mail you whatever personal items you left behind." I heard about Christopher's exit secondhand from Brian in IT, who called me around 4 p.m. just to share the gossip. Apparently the kid tried to argue, said something about wrongful termination and consultant contracts. Security wasn't interested in his legal theories or his Harvard degree. By 5 p.m. my phone was ringing again. Amanda Reeves, Harrow's executive assistant, voice professional but strained like a guitar string about to snap. "Mr. Cooper, Mr. Harrow is hoping to speak with you about potential consulting opportunities. Very generous terms, complete autonomy, essentially writing your own ticket." I let her finish her pitch, then gave her the same answer I'd been giving everyone else that day. "Ma'am, you're going to need new certifications. Federal regulations are pretty clear about the process. Is there any possibility of reinstating your previous credentials? Perhaps an emergency waiver? Not how it works. Once voluntarily revoked, you start from scratch. Takes months, sometimes longer, just like everyone else who wants to do this job." I hung up and walked out to my back porch, cracked open a Shinerbach and called Kevin at A&M. Told him his old man might be between jobs for a while, but not to worry about tuition money. Had enough saved up, and something told me there'd be other opportunities coming along soon enough. The chemical industry's not that big. Word travels fast when someone with 22 years of safety management experience becomes available. My phone started ringing the next morning with offers from competitors who'd heard about Apex's operational difficulties. Funny thing about expertise, it's only worthless to people who don't understand what they're losing. Christopher Hayes learned that lesson the hard way, sitting in his leased BMW in the Apex parking lot at 5:30 p.m. on a Wednesday, wondering how a legacy employee had managed to take down an entire corporation in less than 6 hours. The answer was simple enough. Some things you learn in business school, some things you learn on the job, and some things you only learn when you've been doing the job long enough to know what keeps people alive. Christopher thought he could automate 22 years of hard-won knowledge with sensors and software. Turned out some things can't be optimized, can't be streamlined, can't be transferred to someone cheaper. Some things you just have to respect. Thanks for listening to an old safety manager's war story. Sometimes the good guys do win. You just have to be patient enough to let them.